Hi everyone! Today I'm going over how I did these gorgeous purple chrome nails on my client. Excuse my sick voice, I'm going through a cold right now. I couldn't just give myself the day off. I feel guilty whenever I'm sick and I feel like I still have to do some work. Enough about me, let's get to the nails. So today my client asked for something simple, at least what she thought was simple. Chrome nails are by no means simple. Now, if you're a nail client and not a nail tech watching this, don't be discouraged. Keep asking for chrome nails, we don't mind doing it. Us nail techs just want to get them right, and it requires a little bit of finesse to do that. We'll get to the details of how chrome can be a bit of a pain later on, but for now, we're just working on the nail prep. For this particular client, I've opted for classic nail prep over the dry e-file manicure that I usually do. This is because I've noticed over time while working with her, her skin doesn't do well with that kind of prep. She ends up with a lot of burning once we apply the dehydrator step, and that means somewhere on the cuticle line there's a cut. So for her, we do classic nail prep using a pusher, nippers, and Blue Cross cuticle remover. I think here and there in this clip I might use my refine ball bit on her to clean up hangnails, but it's really her proximal fold area that seems to be the most sensitive. I always am so fascinated when I watch back my work because you can see I'm like cleaning off the nippers after like every cut. And I remember when I was in nail tech school training, I was like, am I always gonna be like cleaning off the nippers after every time I get a little bit of skin in them? And they're like, no, you'll eventually get used to it and you'll end up leaving all the skin in. And I just can't do that anymore. I need to see exactly what I'm trimming because I'm so nervous I'm gonna cut somebody. So I always I run the cuticle nippers on my finger really quick just to clean any of like the little bits of skin that I've trimmed off, just because I hate not being able to see exactly where the blade is. So we've got a lot of prep to get through here, and if you want to hear me talk more in depth about my prep, you can check out one of the other videos on my channel. I'm not sure which one it is that has me talking more in depth about my process, but I know one of them is. But in the meantime, I want to take this time and talk about gloves. Gloves during services is a controversial topic amongst some nail technicians. Some believe gloves are an absolute must for every service all the time. Others think it's just important for pedicures. Some believe you don't need gloves at all. Here's what I've noticed over the past 3 years as a nail technician. Above all, if a client is more comfortable with their technician wearing gloves, regardless of their reasoning, I believe the technician should wear gloves. When it comes to hand services, I always recommend the technician begin the service only after both the client and themselves have washed their hands. After hand washing, I recommend technicians wear gloves for hand services to protect their hands from repeated exposure to products used during services. No product during a nail service is harmful unless it's used improperly, and repeated daily exposure without washing would be considered improper use. So don't worry, you don't need to worry about what we use on your hands. By the end of your appointment, all of the chemicals will have been washed off or removed. It's all entirely safe when used by a licensed nail technician. This is why I recommend gloves, strictly for the nail technician's protection. As for pedicures, my beliefs are the same, and this does include pedicures that have nail fungus and skin fungus. Fungal infections spread in dark, moist, and warm areas. When I'm working, my hands are not in this environment, especially when I'm washing them before each client. This is all to say that I'm very unlikely to catch any of these infections because of the environment that my hands are in while I'm working. Additionally, the gloves that nail technicians use are not sterile. Sterile gloves come in individually wrapped and sealed packages. The gloves that nail technicians use come in boxes. At the factories where these gloves are packaged, when the gloves are packed into the boxes, the worker themselves are not even wearing gloves. There's no need to when the gloves that they're packing are not advertised as being sterile. This is to say that the gloves are not providing an extra sanitized layer of protection between client, and technician. Now, if you're worried that non-sterile gloves may make your fungal infection worse, don't be. Your socks, shoes, and any nail polish that you're using are also not sterile. Neither is the air or the floors in your house. It isn't making your infection any worse. The only things that can make your infection worse are allowing it to continue without treatment and improperly cleaned tools used on your infected area by a nail technician or a podiatrist. This is an area where you, as the client, are in more control. Ask your nail tech how their tools are being cleaned. In some states in the US, sterilization of equipment is not necessary, oftentimes because in those same states, nail technicians are not permitted to work on nails or skin with fungal infections. Therefore, there's no need to sterilize equipment if there is no sensitive tissue. In states where nail techs are allowed to work on fungal infections, it is required that tools be sterilized on top of the other steps required during cleaning. If you're curious, there are 4 steps required in the cleaning process in states where it is permitted for technicians to work on fungal infections. The first step is cleaning, which is scrubbing with an antibacterial soap to get any debris off, and that could also be considered part of the second step, which is disinfecting, because it is antibacterial soap. So cleaning and disinfecting is the scrubbing step, and then sanitizing is when we soak our implements in. Sometimes people use bleach, but it is more recommended to use barbicide, which is that really dark blue liquid that you might see when you're at like a hair salon. They often have their combs in that solution as well. And then sterilization can be done a couple of different ways. I've worked at salons that use UV sterilization, and then I've worked at salons that use autoclave sterilization, which is extreme heat that will kill anything that might have been missed during the other steps of cleaning. So now we know that tools used during the service are always cleaned, disinfected, and sanitized, and depending on the state that you're in, sometimes the tools are even sterilized. So the tools coming into contact with the infected area are clean. So if the gloves aren't sterile but don't pose a risk to the client, and I can't have the disease passed on to me, and the tools I use are properly cleaned, gloves aren't necessary to prevent the spread of a fungal infection. If you're still wary about this, I recommend checking out Meticulous Manicurist here on YouTube. She's another nail technician who specializes in troubled feet and explains this much better than I can. All of this is to say that I don't believe gloves are completely useless. They're not. I still highly recommend glove use for the protection of nail technicians against repeated chemical exposure. An example of this is a terrible habit that I have. If I'm working on nail art and I mess it up, I don't want to waste time by grabbing a lint-free wipe and some alcohol to remove it. I'll literally just take my finger and wipe it off. This is so bad for me. It's really unhealthy to touch uncured gel polish. Repeated exposure to uncured gel can lead to a gel allergy, and if you Google gel polish allergy, you'll see exactly why I don't want to get one. It's nasty. You can lose your nail beds, your skin will peel, it's really gross. And it would basically mean that I can't be a nail tech anymore. So yes, gloves are important, just not for what you think. It's more for us to protect ourselves against chemical exposure than it is for you. And yes, I'm aware I'm not wearing gloves in this video. It's a habit that I really need to work on building this year. I'll be better about it, I promise. So with all that being said, I'm always open to learning more about this industry. The last thing I want to be is a technician stuck in her ways. If there's a safer, more effective method that comes out onto the scene, I want to learn about it. So please share your thoughts, respectfully, of course. I am always open to learning. All right, I'm gonna head out now, let you guys enjoy the crusty cleanup here, and I'll get back to talking once we start actually putting on the extensions. There's a really nice moment here that I'm gonna leave the audio in, but I'm basically explaining to my client why coffin and square shaped nails are a little bit harder to use your phone with. So I thought that was pretty valuable, so I'm just gonna leave that original audio here in the video.
I love the shape, but I feel like it might be too
long. The thing with square shapes too is that when you have them on, when you're texting and doing stuff, you're using this part of your finger. So when you have those almonds, you have access to like all of this. You just don't have access to this. When you've got square shapes on, you've only got access here. You don't have this. It's hard, like you can't text with all of this. You can only text with here. So they're harder to text with and they're a little bit harder to do stuff with because they're wider.
Gotcha.
So they're gonna be covering more. Isn't it funny how by those standards that I just explained, that stilettos would actually be easier to text with than squares? And you think it would be the other way around because stilettos look like crazy, you know, like they're so intimidating. But they're actually way easier to text with than squares because you have so much access to your fingertips. It's just interesting. I don't know. Stilettos are my favorite shape to do on myself. I've been doing the squares lately, just, I don't know, I guess to give myself the challenge. I don't know why, but I'm just in the mood for square lately. But yeah, stilettos are my favorite. They're just so cool looking and so striking. And then they're also really easy to text with. I don't know, I love them. This may surprise some technicians, but I don't always use the mandrel bit on my clients when I'm prepping for application. I find that buffing some types of natural nails is enough grip for the product to stick to. If I have a client who has a job like computer work or sales and their natural nail is already pretty ridged, buffing works by itself for adhesion. If they have a very smooth natural nail or a job that's a bit more demanding, like something in healthcare or if they're a parent, then I'll use the mandrel bit to add a bit more grip for better retention. When I say retention, however, I'm talking about a 2-week retention. I don't ever set my goals for clients' nails to stay for long periods of time, like 6 to 8 weeks. I don't think that that's healthy. Our nails need a rebalance around 2 to 3 weeks, depending on your nail growth rate. Any longer than that, and the apex, or the thickest part of your extension, is past the stress point of the nail, or the part of the nail that takes the most of the pressure when it's hit against something. If your apex is past the stress point of the nail, you get lifting, which is when the product lifts from your natural nails. You want to avoid this for a few reasons. 1, your extensions will start to get caught on things like your hair. And 2, lifting means damage to your natural nails. You might say, Mia, if you're avoiding lifting no matter what, why not just use the mandrel bit on every client? I would say that I aim to customize every service to each client's nail type and lifestyle. Not everyone has the same prep work. When I do Gel X full sets, I like to do one hand at a time, just because it lets my client use their phone with their other hand if they're, needing to do something. If I'm in the mood, then yeah, maybe sometimes I'll do 2 hands, like I'll do them at the same time, but I just like to give them a little bit of freedom. I know that my prep work can take a really long time sometimes, especially with how picky I am with the cuticle area, so I want to give them the freedom to use their phone if they start to get a little antsy while I'm working on them. You can't really tell from here, it's not a super great angle, but I take very extra care when I'm sizing to make sure that the corners of the growth points are covered by the Gel X tips. It's really important that you have your entire nail covered by the Gel X tips. If you've got a major section of sidewall that isn't covered, the tips are not going to last. I know there are some technicians out there that do Gel X that purposefully choose a half size smaller when applying these tips in order to give the nails a kind of slim look, but in my opinion, I would rather have my entire nail covered because they're going to last longer. Like I said, the stress points and the growth points need to be covered. Otherwise, if you hit your nail on something and all of that pressure goes right to your growth points, the tip's going to pop off like it was never glued on in the first place. And sometimes that means I have to file the cuticle line a little bit, which I'll do. Sometimes the Gel X tip is not a perfect fit. These are factory made tips, and yes, they do have those half sizings to make sure that there can be as close of a fit as possible, but sometimes you still have to do a little bit of filing work. But the most important thing about Gel X sizing is that the whole nail is covered. And if you're applying your tips, your sizing, and you see that the sidewalls are still exposed, you size up half a size or a full size or whatever you have to do. And if you do that, and then you notice that the tip's cuticle line is no longer fitting, file the cuticle line. Don't opt for a smaller size. The most important thing is that the whole nail is covered. Right here, I'm applying the X or whatever it's called. I forget the name of it. It's basically a chemical compound that will scratch up the surface of the Gel X tips, so that way the gel can stick to it a little bit better. You can't really see, it's not a great angle, but you want to use this Etch-X stuff until the sizing logo is gone. So like, you'll scratch and scratch and scratch at it and that's why I'm doing it so aggressively. I'm not like painting it like nail polish. You want the inside of these tips to be a little bit beat up, and that's what this formula is made for. So I do it until I can't see the number logo anymore. That's how you know that they're properly prepared for the nail service, and that is what the Gel X website says to do. And I like to do the Etch-X. I forget, I'm just calling it that because I don't know the name of it, but I like to do that while the primer dries on my clients' nails, just to save a little bit of time. I do Gel X a little different than Apres recommends. They recommend you apply a thin layer of Extend gel on the natural nail, cure it separately, and then apply the tip. I like to do it all in one step. I haven't noticed any retention problems doing it this way, and it's just a little bit faster. I'm using the Gelish brand spot lamp. I think it is so easy to use. I love that it's just a little tap and then it turns on. This is so much easier than any of the other like spot curing lamps that I've used before. It's a little bit more expensive, but honestly, so worth it. So something kind of crazy happens here. I realize that those two were completely not attached. And it's a good thing that I noticed before I did the full cure. What happened there basically is that I did not cure them for long enough underneath the spot lamp. This is something that can happen when you do Gel X the way that I do it, or when you do it the way that the brand recommends it. You want to spot cure these guys for like 10 to 15 seconds. I like to do like a little push, 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 push when I'm holding them to make sure that they're fully cured. But even then, when I do it sometimes, it still ends up like kind of halfway lifting before I do the full cure. So just to make sure that you did it properly, before you put your client's hand in the big lamp to do the full cure, double check all of the nails that you just did. Make sure that none of them are starting to lift. Give them a little bit of a push. If they start to move, they're not done yet. They need to be removed and spot cured. And luckily you don't have to soak them off if they're not cured all the way. They just kind of pop like they did in the video. But yeah, this happens with my way of doing Gel X and with the brand's recommendation. I've seen it happen both ways. So this is not something that's just exclusive to the way I prefer to do application. If it was, then I wouldn't be doing it like that anymore. Once you're finished with your flash cure and you're ready to put your client's hand into the big lamp, always, always, always let them know that if they begin to feel any heat, they should take their hand out of the lamp, flip their palm facing up, and then wait for the heat to dissipate. Once the heat's gone, they're okay to put their hand back in the lamp. Let them know they can do this as many times as needed until the full cure is complete, and that no part of nails should be uncomfortable or painful. Explain to them that this heat comes from a chemical inside the gel called photoinitiators, which reacts to blue wavelength UV or LED light. When it comes into contact with this light, it cures, and it produces heat as part of that chemical reaction. This is called an exothermic reaction. It's completely normal, and your client is not being injured by the heat. Your nail will actually protect your nail bed from that strong heat, but it's still going to be unpleasant, so just have them take their hand out if it gets too strong. Don't let a client just sit there in pain. And yes, flipping your hand upside down does help the heat dissipate faster than it would if you just shook your hand around. I don't know why. That's something that is still a mystery to me, but it works. And to save time, I am going to cut out the application of the Gel X tips on the other hand. If you are more interested in watching the entire process from start to finish, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I think I'll keep doing it this way just so we can save a little bit of time and focus on some other parts of the service. Most people know that Gel-X requires filing a little bit just because there's usually a little tab that sticks off from the end of the tip. But not everybody knows that you do have to buff the tips a little bit. You can either use a buffer like I do here, or you can use a praised etch-X formula to do the exact same thing. Both work equally fine. After buffing, I like to go right into polishing. I know some technicians like to seal the cuticle area by using an e-file bit that's small enough for the cuticle pocket, but if I'm working with the 2.0 tips, the cuticle area is already pretty thin, and I don't think that it's needed. However, if I'm working with the old tips, or if my client requests that it's blended, then I will do so. I'm applying this black polish in really thin layers, just because this particular polish I've had bubble on me before, even when applying thin layers. So I just want to avoid that because it just makes a mess of the whole process, especially with chrome. So I'm applying it in like really sheer layers, and I'm applying 2 layers. We'll see later on with the second layer, it's still not completely opaque, but that's okay. The chrome powder that I'm using is one of those like full cover powders, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. You'll see in the final result. I'm applying a chrome base polish here, which is a polish that's made to go underneath chrome powders to make them look their best. It's basically a no-wipe top coat with a high self-leveling ability if you don't have a chrome base. You want this layer to be as perfect as possible because whatever you apply here is what the powder is going to stick to. If you have any bubbles, any like pieces of hair or dust or anything sticking onto the polish or underneath it, you're going to see it when the powder goes on. So I'm being extra careful here and turning each nail after I apply it to check and see if the reflection from my lamp is interrupted by anything sticking out. If I do see something sticking out, I wipe it off like you see here, and then I reapply the chrome base. Time for the powder! The best way to apply chrome powder is little by little. If there's too much powder on the nail, it's going to have a grainy effect instead of that perfectly smooth mirror look. So I apply little by little until the entire nail is covered. I find that these eyeshadow applicator brushes work really well for powder application because of the narrow tip. It gets into the cuticle area really well. I find that bad chrome nails often have a cuticle area that isn't covered by powder. That's either from not rubbing the powder into this area or from not sealing it all the way with your top coat. And make sure you rub it into the area, not just apply it. The chrome powder only sticks and does what it's supposed to when you rub it in. Once you're finished rubbing all the powder in, I switch and turn over the eyeshadow applicator and right here like this and just kind of gently swipe it. And what that does is it takes off any excess powder that didn't get rubbed into the nail. When you top coat chrome, make sure that if you have to put your brush back into the bottle, that you're wiping it very, very thoroughly on a lint-free wipe. You do not want any excess powder getting into your top coat because that whole bottle is going to be destroyed. I think I've ruined maybe like 8 bottles of top coat from doing this. A nice extra step that shows your client that you care is taking an alcohol wipe to their nails after you've top coated your chrome powder. This will help get any of the powder off of your client's skin, and it's going to show if there's any places where your top coat didn't reach and you might have wiped off that chrome powder, so you might have to go in with a second layer. This also will show you if you have any patches on their skin where top coat got attached to their skin, and where there's top coat, there's going to be excess chrome powder. So I like to go in and just kind of nip off any little pieces of top coat, so that way everything looks just really, really clean.
Okay, good.